Hi everybody. It's quite common, I've noticed, in arguments, flame wars, and even some serious debates about theism, about whether or not there's a God, and for atheists to say, provide some evidence, give me some proof. They'll say that to a theist who says there's a God. They'll make the positive claim that there's a God. They'll say, provide me with some evidence, show me some evidence. This sort of ranting, it's fairly common. It gets very tiresome after a while, and you've seen it often enough. Look, personally, if you're talking about Christians, I don't actually do that. I don't ask people to provide me with evidence of the Christian God, because the Christian God is a logical impossibility. The Christian God is asserted as being omnipotent, and omnipotence is impossible. It's logically impossible. Because, of course, something that's omnipotent can do everything, and certain things, being able to do certain things, precludes you from being able to do other things. Yeah, if you can do this, it means you can't do this. A good example of that would be immortality, because God is also asserted as being immortal. So, if God is immortal, that means God can't kill himself. God can't kill himself because if he kills himself, he's not immortal. So by having the property of immortality, he loses the property of mortality. So we found something he can't do, which is die, and we've made it clear that he can't kill himself. So omnipotence is a logical impossibility. To be able to do everything is just absurd. It makes no sense. It's like saying, a square circle or a married bachelor. It's ridiculous. But this is why I don't ask Christians to prove that God exists, because they can't. I don't ask them to provide evidence. There's no point asking someone to provide evidence for something that's already failed logically. If it failed logically, it's not going to fare any better empirically. It's something they can't provide evidence for. If someone told me they were friends with a married bachelor, I wouldn't ask them to prove it to me. I'd say, no, you're not. You're not, because a married bachelor is impossible. I know for certain there is nowhere at all in the universe you can go where you can find me a married bachelor. And no, I don't have to check every nook and cranny of the universe to do that. I don't have to visit every planet and every civilization, in every corner of the existence and check to see if there are no married bachelors. A married bachelor is a logical impossibility. Can't exist. Therefore, the same applies to the Christian God. The Christian God can't exist. So really starting to ask people to provide evidence, it's actually playing into their hand a little bit, if you like. It's actually implying that their God is actually a possibility, which it isn't. It's not a possibility. One of the things I've noticed about beloved children's character, Winnie the Pooh, is that he was always referred to for short as Pooh. He was always referred to as Pooh, not Winnie, which is very odd, because Winnie was his name. Pooh was what he was. That was the species, if you like, in inverted commas, species that he belonged to. It's very odd that, though, when you consider that they referred to him as Winnie for short. That they didn't refer to him as Winnie for short, that they referred to him as Pooh. And Rupert the Bear, always referred to as Rupert. Yeah. Yogi Bear, always referred to as Yogi. Yeah. Paddington Bear, always referred to as Paddington. And in Paddington Bear's case, Bear was kind of like his surname. He wasn't Paddington the Bear, I don't think. He was Paddington Bear. So that's even odder. So, why am I bringing that up? Christians do that with their God. Their God is called Yahweh, or Jehovah, however you want to pronounce it. But they refer to their God as God rather than Yahweh. They refer to him not by his name, but by the thing that he is. This creates a lot of problems, because we're not always clear whether when someone's talking about God, whether they're talking about the Christian God, or they're talking about God in general, some more generalised deistic idea of God. So when someone is talking about whether or not God exists, we need to be clear, are you talking about the Christian God? Or are you just talking about a God, a generalised God with a small g at the beginning of its name. In the case of the Christian God, again, it can't exist. I've no problem saying I am a Gnostic non-believer in the God of Christianity. It can't exist, therefore I know it doesn't exist. If someone wanted to change my mind about that, they'd have to somehow demonstrate to me that logic was wrong. But I don't know how they do that. You know what I mean? It seems ridiculous. So I am as certain the Christian God doesn't exist as I am that married bachelors don't exist, or square circles don't exist. They can't exist. But here's the problem. Okay, what if we have another kind of God? See, the problem with monotheists is they only believe there is one God. Therefore, you ask them, what's the definition of a God? They will always just tell you, they will always describe their God. And like I said, what's terrible about it is they put a capital G at the beginning and use it like it's a name. You know, it's not a name. They do the Winnie the Pooh thing. They say, oh yeah, they refer to it like it's the only one. Now, obviously, I don't think there are any gods. I don't believe there are any gods. So, you know, but they think that theirs is the only one. But there have been thousands of gods proposed throughout the centuries. Now, so if you want to argue about a different kind of God, you need to explain those properties. What properties does he or she or it have? And we can deal with those. Now, if you take omnipotence out of the equation, let's say, okay, well, we've realised that omnipotence is an impossibility, therefore that's not a good thing to claim your God has. We then have to look at what their God does have. But it makes me wonder, well, what is the one thing all gods have in common? Because for the word God to mean something solid, I need to know what all gods proposed have in common. And you see, if it's not omnipotence, then what is it? Because not all gods are creator gods, as I understand it. Indeed, I mean, in something like ancient Greece, some gods were the sons and daughters of other gods, so they can't have been creators. They weren't creators of the universe because their parents were gods. Those gods already existed. Note as well, this is a very they were very anthropomorphized. These gods, they have to have things like parents and so on. Very odd. So what I'm saying is, what is a god? What's the difference between a god and a really, really, really powerful space alien? What's the difference? If you want to say, well, a space alien, super powerful space alien or whatever, didn't create the universe, well, again, neither did gods like Apollo. You know, he didn't create the universe. The universe already existed before he came along. He's part of the universe. I mean, I'm assuming, I mean, again, I don't believe that's what I'm getting from my very vague understanding of Greek mythology. So, we need to actually say I'm certain there are no gods at all. I need to know particularly what people mean. And I believe this position I occupy here is called ig-theism, I believe. Ig, theism. I don't really understand what gods are supposed to be. I understand what individual proposed deities are supposed to be. So I can sort of debunk those on a case-by-case basis. I can say, okay, what qualities does your God have? Omnipotence, okay, no, God doesn't exist. Logical impossibility, we can dismiss that from the word go. Okay, what qualities does your God have? Well, he's just really, really powerful. Okay, but can something be really, really powerful and not be a god? Is that possible? That's you know that because I believe there are things that are really, really powerful. You know, I don't believe they're gods though. I don't call them gods. I don't treat them as gods. So that's strange. I'm just basically doing this because I'm trying to talk about something Jarl did, Cheeky Pimp 208 did in his latest video, which was called Babies Poisoning Atheism, which is a good title, by the way. Yeah, that's the problem I have with either of these terms, agnostic atheist or Gnostic atheist. I can only really have an opinion on God I can only really have an opinion on gods I've heard of. I can't really have an opinion on gods I've not heard of, because I don't know what qualities they have. So I think I can only debunk gods on a case-by-case basis. But I'm intrigued to know if we could somehow reach a concrete, solid definition of what a god is. The problem is you can't get an answer by asking theists, because they'll only tell you about their god, especially monotheists. If you ask a monotheist, what qualities does something have to be a god, they believe there is only one god, and therefore for them a god has to have all those qualities. And it's like Winnie the Pooh. It's like, this is the only one, therefore these are all the, all the qualities he has. You know, when you've got a sample set of one, but then you've got polytheists who believe in more. So they might be better people to ask, thinking about it. That's an interesting one, actually. If some polytheists out there could tell us exactly, give us a very exact definition of what a god is and how it differs from just something that's powerful or something that's extraterrestrial in some way. That would be really good. But monotheists can't really answer this, because they'll only tell you about their god. If you say, what qualities does our god have, they'll tell you about the one true god and what qualities it has, which will be things like omnipotence, which, as I've said several times now, not possible. So yes, the whole idea of agnostic atheism or Gnostic atheism or agnostic theism, Gnostic theism, it's a bit of from my personal perspective as a non-philosopher, it's very complicated, very confusing to me. But I'm certainly not agnostic to the existence of the Christian God, or any other gods that I'm familiar with, I've heard of. The trouble with, I'll add it here, the trouble with the deistic God, the idea there's this God outside of the universe that somehow created our universe. And if it exists outside our universe, does it really exist? When we talk about existence, we're usually talking about things in the universe, are we not? To me, though, the deistic God is irrelevant, really. Its existence has no bearing on the way we live our lives. Whether it exists or not is kind of irrelevant. So it's a bit of an odd thing to quibble about. I mean, I was having this argument with someone a while ago, and they were saying to me that their God, they believe their God exists outside of human sensory perception. They believe, God is just immune to the human senses. And I said, well, that's usually what we call things that don't exist. Things that we can't see, hear, touch, taste, smell, whatever. We usually call those things non-existent, because our senses are the way we determine the existence of things. It seems very odd that someone wants to argue for this almost entirely hypothetical idea. But something that is so far out of our own reach like that, its existence is irrelevant. I mean, unless someone wants to explain to me how it isn't. I mean, how would it affect the way we live our lives? What effect would it have on us at all? So the purest form of deism, to me, in every practical sense, seems actually indistinguishable from atheism. It really doesn't seem to have any bearing on how we live our lives whatsoever. Oh, good. I'm sorry if that's all a bit messy. But yeah, let me know what you think, everyone. Goodbye.